Sup, my name's Q, and this is my shop. And
This is my dust collector.
right now I have it hooked up with two branching paths. This first one runs directly to my miter saw, and the lower path runs to an open coupler that I printed so that I can connect it to my table saw, joiner, and planer. I also took some other people's advice and I picked up this little remote controlled switch. It was only 15 bucks, and it's super helpful to be able to operate the dust collector from the machine that I'm actually working on and not have to get up and run to the other side of the shop every time I want to turn it on and off. This thing is basically the cheapest and lowest end model of dust collector you could possibly find, but it's been working pretty well for me except for one glaring flaw. Pretty frequently as I'm working with tools, I'll notice that the dust collector stopped working, and it's because of this. Whenever it clogs like this, I have to go over to the machine, undo these little hose clamps, and it's a real big hassle that gets really frustrating. But in fairness, it's not this machine's fault. See, these machines are supposed to be run on what's called a cyclone filter. It's basically a big funnel that sucks all of this heavy stuff down so it doesn't clog up your machine like this. But the price on these cyclone filters seems to range from almost what I paid for the machine itself to well over what I paid for the machine itself. And that made me put off buying one. But then I had a thought. These cyclone filters are basically just big hunks of plastic and weird shapes, right? And I've got this little machine that makes big hunks of plastic and weird shapes. So why don't I just try to 3D print one? I found this model from Mixter Exo 3D on MakerWorld and immediately got to work. I uploaded the model into Bamboo Studio, not sponsored, and I could see that it was 4 different pieces. I needed to print 1 of the first piece, 3 of the second piece, 4 of the third piece, and 1 of the fourth piece. In total, it took nearly 2,600 grams of filament to print the whole thing, or just over 2.5 rolls. Now, I'm using some filament that I had lying around, so I'm not really counting the cost, but if I was counting the cost, this technically was about $65, but I already had the filament, so it's free. If you're watching this time-lapse closely, you can see that at the beginning of each layer, the print head is actually over-extruding a little bit, and it leaves behind this fuzzy texture. I later learned how to fix this, but I did end up with a couple of pieces that had that fuzzy texture left over. But I'm certainly not wasting that filament, so I just took my soldering iron to it and kind of smoothed it out. Besides, these don't need to look pretty. Now I just got to put the whole thing together. Oh no. It's a lot of silicone. Hang on. Oh god, it smells so delicious. Get in there. Come on, get in there. God, my hands are so sticky. Everything's so sticky. Don't assemble this inside, is what I've learned. It's very sticky. Well, that sucked enough to make me willing to open my window in freezing conditions, but at least we now have a working filter. Now that I have the filter, I just need like a big bin or barrel to catch all of the stuff that it filters out, and I think I've come up with a solution. A big trash can with a flat lid. I'm using this coupler to mark a 4-inch hole on the lid, and then cutting it out with my utility knife. Next, I'm just applying a bunch of silicone and squeezing it into place. I had to hold my drill at a weird angle to get these holes, but once I had those holes drilled, it was pretty simple to get screws through and then put nuts on them. Now for a little test. I was actually really worried that the trash can was going to make the suction weaker, but it seems pretty strong to me. I just knocked over these pallet runners, and you can see they actually hit the dust chute on my joiner, and they broke the dust chute, and that sucks. But at least I have a 3D printer. Just a quick search and I found that somebody had already modeled that exact part. All I gotta do is print it off real quick, and good as new. Now I'm gonna have to move around my dust collector in order to get the Cyclone in place. I'm putting these 2x4s into the header of my garage so that I have a place to mount it that's lower and closer to the top of the Cyclone. Now it's ready to go. I thought we'd start with a little comparison. This is me running my joiner without the dust collection attached. You can clearly see how quickly the shavings build up. It's a real pain to clean up, and if I let it go on for too long, it'll even clog the dust chute. Now this time with the dust collection turned on. You can clearly see the difference in the mess that this is making. It's not collecting all of the dust, and there's still plenty of fine particles that are getting thrown up into the air and straight into my lungs. I'll worry about those later. But the bulk of the material, probably around 90%, is going straight into my dust collector. Now here's my planer without dust collection. Keep in mind that this piece is much shorter than the one I'm going to be doing with the dust collection. I love how you can see those big shavings swirling down through the translucent filament. And here's a little comparison of the aftermath of both with and without the dust collection. This was all that was left over on the floor after both joining and planing in the same spot with that dust collector. Now let's test the table saw. I was actually really surprised by how little the dust collector seemed to be doing on this tool, but I really blame it more on the tool than the dust collector itself. This is the rigid R4512. I found mine at a yard sale, and this thing was clearly designed with dust collection as an afterthought. But I do have a trick to get that stubborn dust out of this machine. Now let's try that without dust collection turned on. Honestly, I was expecting a bigger difference on the table saw, but I guess because we were ripping such a short piece, it didn't really produce too much dust. Last test, let's change it over to the miter saw. First, without dust collection turned on. Now with dust collection.
I think that's worse.
Now here's the part where I come clean. I fully expected to end this video telling you not to bother trying this yourself, that it was kind of a money sink of a project and that it really wasn't worth all of the time that I put into it when I could have just bought the same thing but better. However, let's look at the numbers here. For starters, we have the translucent PTEG filament for $19.99, and we need 3 rolls of it. Then we got the trash can for $49.97, and we needed some silicone for the assembly. The silicone I used cost about $9.48 per tube, and I used about a tube and a half, although if I was a little bit more sparing, I definitely could have gotten away with just 1 tube. And lastly, I had to buy some miscellaneous hardware, including nuts and screws, which cost me around $15. This puts the total for the entire Cyclone filter at about $125.42. However, since I didn't buy the PTEG for this project, and I didn't buy any silicone either, for me it only cost about $55.97. But even if you were doing this from scratch with nothing but the 3D printer to start with, you could always just buy a cheaper brand of filament. Just for reference, this was the cheapest I could find in 10 seconds searching on Amazon. It's translucent PTEG at $13.29 a roll. If you buy 3 rolls of that, you could spend as little as $105.42 to build this. That price gets even lower if you already had some hardware lying around that you could use, or maybe some silicone like me. That's actually right at the price range of the lowest end option from earlier, and you even get over double the capacity of that one to boot. So even though I started this project thinking I was in some unique position with all this extra material lying around, the economics of it actually really work out. So should you 3D print a Cyclone filter? You tell me.